the Madman! Welcome to the custom Hearthstone cards of the week. This is September 22nd's week, which means we have actually caught up. It finally happened. Wow, this hasn't happened since Boomsday. Got some really creative ones here for you today, and the creative ones aren't even that imbalanced, so this is a refreshing change of pace. Let's start off with Voodoo Master Vex. 9 mana, 3/7, Battlecry, your next Death Rattle triggers twice. Death Rattle, your next Battlecry triggers twice. By the way, in the case that Voodoo Master Vex's Battlecry would affect its own Death Rattle, this does not mean the Battlecry would trigger 4 times, it's just like if you played 2 Murmuring Elementals, your next Battlecry triggers twice means that your Battlecry just triggers twice, which would be bad. So you want to play Voodoo Master Vex and then have it trigger one of your Death Rattles. Now, there's 2 major problems with this. One is that I actually feel like the card is, in its current incarnation, way too weak. So I'm just going to go ahead and start off with a balanced 1-star. It's kind of similar to having a Baron Rivendare effect while also having a Murmuring Elemental effect, both of which weren't imbalanced to the point of like craziness, and those even cost a small amount of mana, so you could actually play around with the Death Rattle and the Battlecry that you specifically wanted. That's problem number 1, that it's too weak, but of course being too weak is easily fixed. You can just change the mana cost, reduce it by a lot, change the stats around, maybe reduce the mana cost and reduce the stats. The bigger concern is with the idea that your next Death Rattle triggers twice and your next Battlecry triggers twice is forever, like for the rest of the game. And there's no good way to track that. So it's basically too big of an effect to just stay dormant for that long of an amount of time, I think. And that is probably a major reason why most Hearthstone cards, there are a few exceptions, but most are trackable in some way to both you and your opponent, or are like immediately used or something like that. So I'm going to give the design on this 2 stars, but I do think that the card is very cool, and it captures the Voodoo Master Vex flavor very well. Wentworth the Wondrous is a hilarious little mage card. 2 mana, 2/2. Start of the game, Battlecry, Death Rattle, and Inspire. Shuffle a Scroll of Wonder into your deck, which has a very realistic chance of coming up with 4 Scroll of Wonders, which is a blatant power creep on Deck of Wonders. Now, granted, Deck of Wonders was never anywhere near good enough to run, but the author may have severely misjudged the power of a Scroll of Wonder. It's not a neutral effect for Scroll of Wonder to go off, because most of them are favorable to you. Sure, some randomly target things, but there are a bunch of cards out there which are strictly good for you. For example, any secret, any card that says draw cards, you would typically play it in some sort of control mage, which means that board clears are generally favorable for you. So it's too dangerous for even a start of game to just shuffle a Scroll of Wonder into your deck. And this goes back to, if you watched last week's custom Hearthstone cards, start of game is really dangerous when it gives you something for free, and something even as innocent as a Scroll of Wonder into your deck. That's still too powerful. It just has the chance of high rolling so high that the start of game needs to be taken out. Inspire is a mechanic that probably isn't going to come back. I'm not going to dock points for Inspire anymore because it could just say whenever you use your hero power, but in this case, the text of the card would be overflowing, so I don't like the Inspire on this. But I do think the card is interesting enough with a Battlecry and a Death Rattle of shuffling a Scroll of Wonder into your deck. And I actually think that that card could be very fair. 2 mana, 2/2, Battlecry and Death Rattle, shuffle a Scroll of Wonder into your deck. Pretty random, but I feel like that actually would be good enough to push some competitive play. But boy, do I not want games to just be randomly decided by if you high roll Scroll of Wonders. As much as I like the idea, I just think it's quite a bit too dangerous as a 2 mana card which gives you 2 Scroll of Wonders. Like even a 2 mana 2/2 which gives you 1 Scroll of Wonder, that would be pretty random, maybe that would be okay. Design 3 stars, but I can't help but emphasize how dangerous it could be to have a low cost, not that big a penalty way of getting a Scroll of Wonder into your deck. And the balance is 2 stars, honestly far too powerful at 2 mana with the start of game Battlecry, Death Rattle, and Inspire. Which just goes to show you the power of Scroll of Wonder, but also the power of start of game. Tech support, 4 mana 3/4, mech, Battlecry, restart a friendly mech, destroy it and resummon it with +1/+1. It's very similar to Fireworks tech from Hunter, in the sense that probably the main purpose of this would be to activate mechs with Death Rattle, And then the question is that too much redundancy with Fireworks tech? Yeah, and I think it might be okay because Fireworks tech has mostly not seeing play anymore from these Death Rattle Hunter decks. This card does not necessarily have to be a mech itself. I actually think it would be interesting flavor. If it was similar to Fireworks tech, it could be Goblin tech support or anything, and then have a picture of, you know, some sort of dynamite, and the flavor is really cool. So I'm gonna give the design 5 stars, and balance 5 stars also, in the sense that Fireworks tech is a hunter-specific card. This is neutral, anyone could use it. I think it's okay for anyone to be able to use it, especially since it costs 4 mana. Warrior gets an interesting mana cheat card. 2 mana salvage operation. If you control a mech, the next card you play this turn costs armor instead of mana. And you always gotta look at mana cheat cards with a careful eye. Is it too overpowered? There have been many mana cheat cards in the past that have had big problems, and there have been other mana cheat cards that have been okay. One of the examples is Blood Bloom from Warlock, because it had enough of restrictions. It can only be used to cast Warlock spells, or spells in general, but you're playing a Warlock and it's very rare for you to get anything other than Warlock spells. This one though, any card you play will just cost armor instead of mana, but it has 2 severe restrictions on it. 1, you must have a mech in play. 2, you must have enough armor to pay for it. You can't have a mech in play and then immediately gain armor and then play salvage operation. You can't have armor already and then play a mech and then play salvage operation. But either way, it looks like you're probably not going to be cheating the mana out unless you have, like, when things go well. I think it's a tough card to make work, and for that reason, I think I'm gonna give the design 5 stars. It's got cool flavor. You could think about maybe you want it to only the next mech you play costs armor instead of play. Maybe you could get rid of the mech. That'd be a completely different card, but salvage operation also fits that flavor well. But as is, it's also fine. Balance 5 stars. I think that the card is not crazy, even though it could mana cheat out any number of things. The restrictions are fine. Dicey Dealer. Hunter 2 mana 1/1. Death Rattle, your next hero power deals 2 damage to all enemies. So this is a on death effect. Your hero power just changes to takedown and will change back to your original hero power as soon as you press the button. Which is a really cool take on Consecration, because basically 2 plus 2 is Consecration and you get a 1/1, but you can't immediately use it the turn that you play it. It just stays around and is visible to the opponent of, hey, I can take down whenever I want. So naturally, it's more of a control hunter type card, and I like that. You might say, would aggro hunter still want it? Because aggro paladin sometimes ran Consecration, and it sticks around until you use the card, which means you'd be obligated to use it pretty fast, because you can't steady shot while your hero power is takedown. So it does seem like it would be more of a control hunter card. Design 5 stars, balance 5 stars. I think it's a really cool idea to have a hero power stay around until you use it. And I think this is well costed and fits a cool theme. King Todd the Third. 4 mana 3/5 beast. It ignores Taunt, Lifesteal, Divine Shield, and Poisonous. So my original thought on this card when I looked at it is just run Spellbreaker. Sure, in some cases, like when they play Annoyatron, Giggling Inventor, the King Todd the Third could deal with both Annoyatrons, and that has some benefit over Spellbreaker, but Spellbreaker not only gets rid of Taunt, Lifesteal, Divine Shield, and Poisonous on any one card, it also gets rid of, importantly, Death Rattle. So it's kind of tough for King Todd to compare when it's only got one more stat than Spellbreaker, and Spellbreaker is immediate. King Todd might not even ignore the Taunt, Lifesteal, Divine Shield, and Poisonous, because it's just a 5 health minion your opponent just kills to King Todd, if they have something to protect. So I'm thinking you either power creep Yeti by making it a 4 mana 4/5, or you go with the classic stat line of a 3 mana 3/4 with a benefit. I think either will work just fine. Design 5 star, balance 4 star. And yes, this can be put into the Deathstalker Rexar pool. I don't think it's too crazy for that to be put in, and also Deathstalker Rexar is only in the meta for only about 6 more months. Blight Infester, a Warlock 3 mana 2/3. A very small mana text, but really big text, can only take lethal damage. Which means if you're dealing 2 damage to the default Infester, nothing happens. Really dangerous if this card gets buffed, like with a Soul Infusion, then if you deal 4 damage to the Infester, nothing happens. Card could theoretically shut down Zoo if it got +3 health and Taunt, because it's very hard for Zoo to get past 6 health with one shot. They can use a bunch of minions to combine damage, but with the Blight Infestor, you can't. Also concerning is how this works with Divine Shield, because since the card can only take lethal damage, it won't take damage, which means if it were to get Divine Shield somehow, which is difficult given that this is a Warlock card, but if it were to get it, then it would just stay around forever. So I feel like this card does restrict design quite a bit in the future. And it's also one of those feels terrible cards, because if you're Zoo and your opponent has a taunted Infestor out, which has just 6 health, then it's basically over for you. Still vulnerable to silence and whatnot, but some decks don't run silence, and it feels really bad for one card to shut an entire deck down. That's why Sogoth was, for example, printed so conservatively. So a cool idea, but way too restrictive on things. I'll give the design 2 stars. The balance, interestingly enough, is currently on the weak side, which goes to show that in order to balance such a card, you would have to price it out of viability. Currently, I don't believe anyone would play Blight Infestor, because while it can shut down some decks against other decks, it's just a 3 mana 2/3. And so balance, 3 stars, it's currently too weak and wouldn't see play. At the same time, it's too dangerous to see print. Patchwork! Neutral legendary, 6 mana 5/5 minion. You can stitch any 2 minions together as if they were magnetic, which means from whenever you play Patchwork, every card you play to the left of one of your minions will now attach on. And you can quickly picture that if you combine any 2 cards' text together, pretty crazy stuff can happen. Here's a simple example. You stitch Worgen Infiltrator onto Patchwork, making it a 6 mana 7/6 with stealth. You then wait a turn, and then the next turn you can do pretty much whatever you want, including something like Glinda, and then stitching, let's just say 100 Wisps onto Patchwork. And then Patchwork hits you for a lot out of stealth. Very scary. That's just one of many crazy combinations you can do with Patchwork. Not to mention, Build a Beast is specifically coded. If you can stitch any 2 minions together, you know, now that I think about it, it's way worse of an idea. Like, there was enough of a headache, I'm sure, on the Hearthstone team to be able to combine any 2 beasts together, one of which had only very simple text and one of which had, you know, complex text. Now when you can combine any 2 cards together, of which, like, you could combine many cards which had many complex text on it, some of which are probably contradictory sometimes, this card can never work. So I'm gonna give the design 1 star. It can literally never work in Hearthstone. You would break Hearthstone forever or something like that. The balance is 1 star with current incarnation because of the crazy combo that are already highlighted. Interesting idea, but in order to save the Hearthstone team some sanity, we can never consider something like this. Fire Dancer, 3 mana 3/3 mage minion. Inspire, attack the target of your hero power. So there's an easy way to get around the Inspire keyword. You could just write Fire Dancer's text block as, whenever you use your hero power, Fire Dancer attacks the target. I think it's really cool design in that you can play Fire Dancer on 5 and then you can just hero power something and Fire Dancer will immediately attack. Also intended that Fire Dancer can attack and then you hero power the target you want Fire Dancer to attack again and then Fire Dancer immediately attacks. Is that imbalanced? No, I don't think so, because there was a very similar card already printed. Was that broken? Nowhere near. I really like the idea. She's dancing with fire, really oozing with flavor, I'd say. So design 5 star, balance 5 star. I think it's really cool. Cobalt Sensei, 4 mana 3/4. If you have no weapon, your hero has +1 attack. So the idea of this card is it's a sensei who's teaching all the heroes out there how to fight better without weapons. I just have a problem with this kobold teaching a few specific classes how to fight barehanded, notably Jaina or Mage in general, Priest and Warlock. I don't think they would be able to do that. And yes, I know we're in the Hearthstone world, but it's just such a design disconnect for me there. Also, by the way that this is worded is that your hero has +1 attack, which means your hero will counterattack enemies that hit it. But that's not necessarily a problem because Cobalt Sensei can be removed and then your attack is removed. Kind of similar to animated armor from Mage, like the effect is really powerful, but you can just turn it off by killing the minion. So because I have a problem with the Cobalt Sensei being neutral in specific, I'm going to give the design 3 stars. I feel like it should either be a class card or perhaps an interesting choice would be to give it one of the tri-class cards. Hunter, Paladin, Warrior as classes that traditionally do get into fighting, or perhaps even Rogue, Druid, Shaman could be interesting. Balance on this card, 4 stars. I think it's a little bit weak. I think it could be pushed up to a 4 mana 4/4. Finally, we've got Shadow Word Insanity. 1 mana priest card, spell. Give a minion after a minion is played, attack it. You would generally put this spell onto an opponent's minion, which would discourage them from playing further minions because the minion that they play will fight the current minion they have in play. But it can be played around because your opponent can simply not play a minion. Also, it stops you from playing minions because when you play a minion, it'll immediately attack the target of Shadow Word Insanity. Alternatively, you could immediately play Shadow Word Insanity on an enemy minion and then play a minion, and then they would immediately fight. Like maybe you want to use it as bad removal like that. You can also combine it with playing this on one of your poisonous cards, and then when your opponent plays minions, your poisonous guy attacks that minion. Though interesting flexibility, I think it's cool flavor for Priest. Seems fair enough. Cool design 5-star, balance 5 stars. And that's it, we're caught up on the custom cards of Hearthstone. Look forward to this segment just appearing one time a week with all the latest cards of custom Hearthstone.